I never imagined that a simple school day could turn into something I would never forget. I was always the kind of person who observes more than speaks, who prefers to hide in the shadows rather than be noticed. But there are moments in life that pull us into the spotlight, even when we think it will never happen. What you are about to read is about bullies, humiliation, and family secrets no one could have imagined. It all started on a Monday, when I walked into the classroom with my uniform perfectly neat and my heavy backpack. I was trying to go unnoticed, as I always did, but it was impossible to ignore the stares of two boys who always liked to provoke others. They began laughing at me, making jokes about my appearance, my accent, and even my clothes. I felt that heat in my face that signals embarrassment, but I tried not to show fear. I took a deep breath, just as my mother always told me, and thought, ignore it. It's not worth it. But the problem is that ignoring it isn't always easy, especially when the humiliation becomes public. Then, when one of them finally approached, ready to embarrass me in front of the whole class, something unexpected happened. I felt a protective shiver run through my body, as if a giant shadow was about to appear. And, in a way, someone did appear, someone they could never have imagined. The air in the classroom felt heavy, as if every laugh from the boys had left an invisible mark on the floor. I swallowed hard, trying to think quickly. Then, I heard a sound I'll never forget, the firm snap of strong footsteps approaching. Everyone turned their heads, and so did I. In the hallway, standing right at the door, was my father. He wasn't an ordinary man, his presence had something that made even the most arrogant bullies hesitate. My heart raced, a mix of fear and hope running through my veins. They, of course, had no idea who he was. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but full of authority. The boys froze. One of them stammered, trying to make up an excuse, but my father just raised an eyebrow. The tension was palpable. I felt the entire class's eyes now on me, and for a moment, I wished I could disappear. Then my father took a step forward and said something that shook the room, even if no one realized it. "You should think twice before messing with my daughter." The bullies went pale. They didn't know it, but my father was respected and feared in the neighborhood, someone with connections that could make anyone regret their actions. The boldest one swallowed hard and looked away. At that moment, I felt a wave of pride and relief wash over me, not because he had defended my honor, but because he showed me that we don't always have to face everything alone. Sometimes, strength comes from those by our side, even when we feel vulnerable. And the boys? Well, that day, they learned that some people cannot be messed with. And I learned something even more important: courage doesn't always come from within us, sometimes, it arrives in the form of a giant shadow that shows up at just the right moment. The rest of the day felt surreal. Whispers followed me everywhere I went, like invisible shadows trailing my every step. I could feel the curious eyes of classmates, some filled with admiration, others with thinly veiled jealousy. The bullies, the ones who had laughed at me that morning, now avoided me completely, their arrogance replaced by caution and unease. During lunch, I sat quietly at the corner table, pretending to read my book, but it was impossible to ignore the occasional glance from my classmates. I could hear snippets of conversations. "Did you see her dad? He's terrifying. I can't believe they dared." It was a mix of relief and embarrassment. Relief because the humiliation had stopped, but embarrassment because everyone now looked at me differently. I realized something: people often fear what they don't understand, and respect can be just as intimidating as fear. After school, my father walked me to the car. The cool afternoon breeze barely touched us as we stood there, and I finally felt safe enough to ask the question that had been on my mind since that morning. "Dad, why didn't you tell anyone at school who you were?" He smiled gently, his eyes full of wisdom. "Because, sometimes, it's better for people to see you for who you are, not for who your family is. But when someone tries to harm you, well, then it's time to remind them that actions have consequences." I nodded, understanding more than words could express. That day had taught me that courage isn't always standing up alone. Sometimes it's knowing that support can come in unexpected forms. In the weeks that followed, life at school changed. The bullies never bothered me again, but it wasn't just about fear anymore. Something had shifted in the classroom's atmosphere. People treated me with more respect, not because of who my father was, but because they had witnessed a moment that showed them the value of integrity, loyalty, and boundaries. I also changed. I started speaking up more, refusing to shrink into the background. I realized that hiding doesn't make problems disappear, it only gives them power over you. And if someone truly wanted to challenge me, I knew now that I had strength inside me, and sometimes, shadows outside me, ready to protect me. The most important lesson I learned that day wasn't about power, fear, or revenge. It was about understanding that courage can be quiet or loud, subtle or dramatic, but it always leaves an imprint. And from that day on, I walked through the school corridors not as a girl to be mocked, but as someone who knew her worth and her strength even in moments of vulnerability. Life after that day was nothing like I had expected. At first, the attention I received at school was overwhelming. I could feel the weight of every gaze, the silent judgments, and the whispered speculations about who I was and what my father did. Some of it was flattering, but much of it felt like a spotlight I didn't ask for. I had spent so long hiding, trying to be invisible, that suddenly, everyone knew my story. But over time, I learned to navigate it. I discovered that respect is not something that can be demanded, it's something earned, even if it starts with fear. Slowly, I began to speak up in class, share my opinions, and even challenge ideas I didn't agree with. It felt strange at first, like stepping into shoes that were too big for me, but with each day, I grew more confident. The bullies? They faded into the background, no longer daring to cross me. Yet, life had other challenges waiting. Just because one danger was gone didn't mean the world suddenly became safe. I faced new struggles, group projects, competitions, misunderstandings, and even subtle forms of prejudice. But that day, when my father had arrived like a shadow from nowhere, had changed something deep inside me. I learned that courage can come from within, but sometimes it also comes from knowing someone has your back. I also noticed changes in my friendships. People who had never spoken to me before now approached, some cautiously, others with genuine curiosity. I learned who valued me for my personality and who was only interested in my story. It was a painful, confusing lesson at times, but it taught me discernment, the kind of wisdom you only gain through experience. One afternoon, weeks after the incident, I was sitting in the library, buried in my books, when a classmate came over. She was timid, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to say thank you for showing us that standing up doesn't have to be loud, and that sometimes, the right kind of support can make all the difference. Her words surprised me. I realized then that what had happened that day wasn't just about me. It had ripple effects. People were learning not just about fear or power, but about empathy, protection, and courage. Even my relationship with my father evolved. I understood that his presence that day wasn't about control or intimidation, it was about teaching me, silently, the value of self-respect and knowing when to let others show their true colors. He had always believed in leading by example, not words, and that day he had taught me a lesson I would carry for the rest of my life. By the end of the school year, I was no longer the girl who shrank in the corner. I walked through the halls with my head held high, not arrogantly, but with quiet confidence. I knew my worth, I knew my limits, and I knew that life would continue to test me. But I also knew that I could face it, sometimes alone, sometimes with the unexpected support of shadows that appear just when you need them most. And the biggest revelation of all? Courage isn't just one moment. It's a series of choices, small and large, silent and bold. That day, I learned that the right combination of inner strength and trusted support can change everything. And from that moment on, I vowed never to let fear dictate who I was or how I lived my life. The months that followed that fateful day were like nothing I could have imagined. Life at school had shifted dramatically, but not in ways I expected. It wasn't just about the bullies disappearing or the whispers fading. It was about the subtle, transformative ripple that had started in the classroom and spread through every corner of my life. I began to notice things I had never paid attention to before: the quiet kids who always sat alone, the students who seemed invisible, and the ones who smiled but were secretly struggling. I realized that courage wasn't just about defending yourself, it was about noticing others, speaking up when it matters, and offering support even when no one is watching. I started small, helping classmates with assignments, defending someone from a teasing comment, or simply listening when someone needed to talk. Meanwhile, the bullies had changed too. Not all at once, but subtly. Their arrogance had been replaced by a cautious respect, but some of them carried grudges, invisible and simmering. It was a delicate balance, knowing that some dangers might resurface if I let my guard down, and that true strength is not in intimidation, but in being ready for any challenge without letting it consume you. One day, during a group project in biology, one of the bullies, now quieter, almost sheepish, approached me. His tone was hesitant. "Look, I just wanted to say sorry. I was wrong about a lot of things." I studied him carefully, weighing his words. The temptation to dismiss him was strong, but something inside me said, "This is part of life, everyone can change, but you have to recognize it." "It's okay," I replied, finally letting a smile escape. "Just don't make the same mistake again." That small exchange was monumental. It taught me that courage isn't just standing up to threats, it's also having the wisdom to forgive and move forward, without letting past fears dictate your future. Outside of school, life was shifting too. My father and I grew closer, sharing long walks, quiet conversations, and the occasional laughter that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. He never boasted about his influence or power. Instead, he taught me lessons through actions, showing me that integrity, courage, and empathy were far more important than fear or intimidation. The most transformative moments, however, came from unexpected friendships. Students who had once ignored me or underestimated me began to see me in a new light. I found companions who shared my values, my humor, and my sense of curiosity about the world. Together, we created a small circle of support, laughter, and encouragement, a microcosm where courage was nurtured, not demanded. But life, of course, is never simple. One afternoon, during a major school event, the bullies tried to provoke a scene again. The room fell silent as tension crackled like electricity. I could feel the old fear stirring, the memories of that morning rushing back. But instead of panicking, I took a deep breath and remembered every lesson I had learned, the strength I had discovered within myself, the support from friends, and the unwavering presence of my father's guidance in my life. I confronted them, not with rage, but with calm authority. Enough. We're done with this. You've had your chance, and now it's time to move on. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt complete control over the situation. They left, not humiliated, but confronted with someone who would no longer allow fear to dictate her life. And I realized that this moment wasn't just a victory over them, it was a victory over the part of me that had once doubted herself, that had felt powerless, and that had hidden behind invisibility. From that day onward, I carried myself differently. My confidence wasn't loud or arrogant, it was quiet, unshakable, and rooted in understanding my worth. People noticed, not because I was the daughter of someone important, but because I had become someone who could face challenges, support others, and navigate life with courage and empathy. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, life will always throw obstacles your way, people who doubt you, situations that terrify you, and challenges that seem insurmountable. But true strength comes from knowing yourself, recognizing when to stand tall, when to accept help, and when to show kindness even to those who once tried to harm you. That day, the day the bullies learned who my father was only the beginning. What followed was a journey of resilience, courage, and growth, a journey that shaped me into someone ready to face the world, no matter what shadows might appear. The months that followed became a crucible for everything I had learned. Life was no longer about surviving daily humiliations, it was about shaping my own story, taking control of the narrative that had once been dictated by fear, whispers, and shadows. Each day became a test, not of courage alone, but of wisdom, patience, and empathy. School, which had once felt like a battlefield, gradually transformed into a space of learning, not just academically, but emotionally and socially. I began taking leadership roles, organizing small events, helping younger students navigate challenges, and mentoring those who felt invisible, just as I had. In the process, I discovered that influence isn't about intimidation, it's about the quiet power of guiding others, of inspiring confidence and resilience without demanding it. The bullies, once larger-than-life figures in my daily fears, became more like cautionary tales. Some tried to regain their dominance, but I no longer reacted with anxiety or anger. I had learned to anticipate, to respond calmly, and to protect myself without aggression. One day, during a heated debate in history class, one of them attempted to provoke me in front of everyone. But I met his gaze steadily and said, "I will not be part of this. If you want respect, earn it. If you want conflict, do it elsewhere." The classroom went silent, and in that silence, I realized that I had transcended fear. It was no longer about my father's shadow or their intimidation, it was about the strength I had cultivated within myself. Outside the classroom, my relationships flourished. Friends who had once seemed distant became allies and confidants. We laughed, studied, and supported each other, creating a network that reminded me daily that life isn't meant to be faced alone. I also learned the difficult art of discernment, recognizing who genuinely cared and who sought only to benefit from my story. My father remained my anchor, but his lessons had evolved. He no longer needed to physically intervene. Instead, he guided me through advice, stories, and quiet presence. I understood now that his earlier appearance at school had been both shield and teacher. He had shown me that sometimes strength is not in action but in presence, the knowledge that someone believes in you, and that you are not alone. By the end of the year, I found myself in the school auditorium during the annual awards ceremony. I had been nominated for recognition in leadership, empathy, and resilience. As I walked onto the stage to accept the award, I scanned the audience. Faces that had once judged me now watched with admiration, curiosity, and respect. And in that moment, I realized something profound. This journey wasn't about revenge, fear, or proving anyone wrong. It was about growing into someone who could face life unflinchingly, help others, and embrace challenges as opportunities rather than threats. Later that night, I reflected on everything that had happened: the bullies, my father's intervention, the friendships formed, the lessons learned. I understood that courage is multifaceted. It is not always dramatic or visible. It is quiet, consistent, and often invisible. It manifests in standing up for yourself, in supporting others, and in making choices that align with integrity even when fear is present. And the most beautiful revelation of all: life will always present obstacles. People will doubt you. Situations will threaten your peace. Challenges will seem impossible. But if you cultivate inner strength, seek support when needed, and act with wisdom and empathy, you can navigate anything. The shadows that once loomed, embodied in bullies, fear, and uncertainty, had transformed into lessons, guidance, and resilience. And I, once the quiet girl hiding in the corners, had grown into someone capable of facing the world head-on, embracing both her vulnerability and her power. In the end, I realized that true courage isn't a single act. It's a lifetime of choices, actions, and lessons, each building upon the last. And as I stepped out of the auditorium that night, holding my award, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. The girl who had once feared ridicule now walked freely, strong, empathetic, and ready to shape her own destiny. Because life, as I had learned, isn't about the shadows that chase you, it's about how you choose to shine, even when they are right behind you. The story didn't end with one victory or a single confrontation. Life, I realized, is a series of battles and lessons, each testing our courage, empathy, and resilience. After the award ceremony, the ripple effects of that pivotal day continued to shape me, my relationships, and even the culture of my school. In the following months, I noticed subtle yet profound changes. The students who had once felt invisible began to speak up. They joined conversations, expressed ideas in class, and slowly, the atmosphere of fear and hierarchy that had dominated for years began to dissipate. It was as though the courage I had learned to embrace was contagious, spreading quietly through the halls. But challenges never truly disappeared. One day, a major incident occurred. A new group of students joined the school, and with them came arrogance and subtle bullying. They weren't like the old bullies. They were clever, manipulative, and skilled at hiding cruelty behind charm. I felt the familiar tension rise in my chest, but this time, I didn't freeze. I had learned to read situations, anticipate conflict, and act with both calmness and strength. I approached the situation differently. Rather than confronting them with anger or intimidation, I engaged with logic, empathy, and assertiveness. I spoke to them one-on-one, helping them understand boundaries and respect, while subtly exposing manipulative behaviors to those who needed to see the truth. It was exhausting, but I realized that courage wasn't just about defending yourself, it was about creating an environment where respect and integrity could flourish. At home, my father became more of a mentor than a protector. Our conversations evolved into deep discussions about morality, leadership, and human nature. He taught me that real strength is subtle. It doesn't always involve dramatic interventions, but rather patience, foresight, and the ability to influence others through example. I began journaling his lessons, reflecting on my own growth, and planning ways to use my experiences to help others, both in school and beyond. Friendships deepened, too. Those who had once approached me out of curiosity now became loyal allies. We supported each other academically, emotionally, and socially, forming a network that was resilient, inclusive, and empowering. We celebrated victories together, learned from mistakes, and, most importantly, held each other accountable. I discovered that true leadership isn't about control, it's about fostering an environment where everyone can thrive. Then came the unexpected turning point: a major school competition. My team was competing in a debate against the most competitive group in the school, including some of the older students who had once intimidated me. The pressure was immense, but I felt ready. I spoke with clarity, conviction, and empathy, drawing not just on knowledge, but on every lesson life had taught me about courage, listening, and understanding different perspectives. By the end of the competition, we had won, not just because of arguments or strategy, but because we had demonstrated collaboration, integrity, and resilience. The applause from the audience was overwhelming, but it wasn't just about recognition, it was a validation of the growth I had undergone over months, shaped by challenges, support, and the choices I had made. Even the old bullies approached me afterward. There was no tension, no lingering fear, only mutual recognition. We had all changed. They had learned humility, I had learned assertiveness, and the environment itself had shifted toward mutual respect. It was a lesson in transformation, not revenge. The most profound change, however, occurred within me. I no longer measured my worth by the opinions of others or by fear of ridicule. I had developed a deep sense of self-respect, resilience, and empathy. I had learned to navigate life with both confidence and humility, understanding that true courage is not just about facing threats, but about embracing challenges, supporting others, and making choices that reflect your values. By the end of that year, I felt like a new person. The girl who had once cowered in the corner, trembling at whispers and ridicule, had transformed into someone capable of inspiring change, leading with empathy, and facing life's uncertainties with unwavering resolve. I understood that life would always present new obstacles, but I was ready. Shadows might appear again, challenges would come, and fear might rise, but now I had the tools, the wisdom, and the inner strength to face anything. And the most important lesson of all crystallized in my heart: life isn't about avoiding shadows, it's about learning to walk through them with courage, compassion, and clarity, knowing that every step forward shapes not just who you are, but the world around you. In the end, I realized that growth, courage, and resilience are not a destination, they are a lifelong journey, and every challenge, every person, every unexpected moment contributes to the person we become. I had stepped into the light from the shadows, but I knew the journey wasn't over. Life would continue to test me, and I would continue to rise, stronger, wiser, and more fearless with every step. Life, I realized, is a constant test, a series of unpredictable events that push you to your limits, challenge your beliefs, and reveal the depths of your courage. After the school competition, I felt a sense of accomplishment, but it was only the beginning. The world beyond the classroom presented challenges far more complex than bullies or debates. I was learning that true resilience isn't just about standing up to others, it's about confronting uncertainty, embracing responsibility, and growing in the face of adversity. The following months brought new experiences, some exhilarating, others frightening. I began taking on leadership roles beyond school, mentoring younger students, participating in community initiatives, and even speaking at small local events. Each opportunity tested my confidence, communication, and emotional intelligence. The lessons I had learned from my father's guidance and my own experiences became tools I relied on daily. I realized that courage was not a singular act, it was a habit, a mindset cultivated through repeated choices. One afternoon, a situation arose that would redefine my understanding of bravery. A younger student was being unfairly targeted by a group from another school during a collaborative event. The intimidation was subtle but effective, the kind that leaves scars without anyone noticing. My instincts screamed to intervene, but I knew a direct confrontation could escalate the situation. I paused, assessing, strategizing. Then, I stepped in, not with anger, but with calm authority, guiding both sides toward understanding and compromise. The result surprised everyone, including myself. The conflict dissolved, the student was protected, and I realized that true courage sometimes manifests in patience, wisdom, and the ability to influence others without force. Meanwhile, my relationships with friends deepened in unexpected ways. Those who had once seemed distant became integral to my support system. We celebrated achievements together, comforted each other in setbacks, and held one another accountable for our choices. I began to understand that resilience isn't solitary, it thrives in communities of trust and empathy. I also learned the value of selective vulnerability, knowing when to share your fears and when to stand firm, building connections that are both authentic and empowering. The shadows of the past, the bullies, the ridicule, the fear, still lingered occasionally, as life never fully erases old wounds. But now, those shadows served a purpose. They reminded me of the strength I had gained, the lessons I had internalized, and the responsibility I carried to protect not just myself, but others. I no longer feared confrontation because I had learned to navigate it with both intelligence and compassion. My father's role evolved into that of a mentor, confidant, and moral compass. He never intervened directly anymore, but his lessons echoed in every decision I made. He taught me that power isn't about control, it's about influence, integrity, and the ability to inspire positive change. Every choice I made reflected that understanding, and gradually, I began to see the impact not only on myself but on everyone around me. Then came an unexpected turning point, a regional competition that tested not just skill, but emotional resilience, teamwork, and strategic thinking. The pressure was immense, and the stakes were higher than anything I had faced before. I felt the old fear stirring in my chest, the fear of failure, of judgment, of disappointment, but I remembered every lesson I had learned: courage, patience, empathy, and preparation. I approached the challenge with clarity, focus, and the knowledge that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. The event was grueling. Opponents were skilled, judges were critical, and moments of doubt crept in. Yet, with each obstacle, I drew on my inner strength and the support of those I trusted. By the final round, I felt a sense of calm determination, a deep awareness that the outcome was secondary to the growth I had undergone. When our team emerged victorious, the applause was overwhelming, but it wasn't validation I sought, it was proof to myself that perseverance, wisdom, and courage were inseparable. In the weeks that followed, I reflected deeply. Life, I realized, is never about a single moment or victory. It is about the accumulation of choices, the lessons learned through adversity, and the relationships forged in both struggle and triumph. I had transformed from the timid girl who hid in the corners of the classroom into someone capable of inspiring, leading, and facing life's uncertainties with poise and determination. And the ultimate revelation: courage is not finite, fear is not permanent, and resilience is not solitary. Every shadow, every challenge, every moment of doubt is an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to shine. Life would continue to test me in ways I could not yet imagine, but I knew that I was ready. I had walked through fear, embraced support, and cultivated strength that no obstacle could erase. Standing on the threshold of a new chapter, I understood that my journey was far from over, but I also knew that I would never be the same person I once was. The girl who had trembled under ridicule had become someone who faced the world with courage, wisdom, and an unwavering sense of purpose. And in that truth, I found a freedom more powerful than fear, more enduring than shadow, and more transformative than any challenge life could present. Life, I realized, is not about waiting for shadows to pass, it's about learning to move through them with grace, strength, and clarity, knowing that every step forward shapes not just who you are, but the world you inhabit. And as I stepped forward into the unknown, I carried with me every lesson, every victory, and every shadow overcome, ready to face whatever came next with courage, compassion, and unwavering resolve. Life, I realized, is never simple. Even after the victories, the lessons, and the growth, challenges continued to emerge, each demanding more of me than I thought I could give. The events of that pivotal day, when my father had arrived like a shadow to protect me, were only the beginning. What followed was a lifelong journey of resilience, learning, and self-discovery, and I now understand that courage is not measured in a single moment, but in the countless choices that shape who we become. After the school competition, I began to notice how my presence changed the environment around me. Classrooms that had once been dominated by fear slowly became spaces of collaboration. Students who had been silent found their voices. The bully shadow still lingered, but their influence had weakened, and in its place grew a subtle respect that I had never expected to feel. It was remarkable how courage, once sparked in one individual, can ripple outward and transform an entire community. Yet, life didn't stop testing me. A new group of students arrived mid-year, bringing with them subtle cruelty and cunning manipulation. Unlike the straightforward bullying I had faced before, this challenge was insidious: hidden comments, sly tactics, and subtle threats designed to undermine confidence. I felt the old anxiety stir in my chest, but I had grown. I approached the situation strategically, observing carefully, listening intently, and responding with a balance of firmness and empathy. I realized that courage is not always loud, it is measured in patience, awareness, and the ability to guide others toward understanding rather than conflict. Friendships deepened in profound ways. Those who had once approached me cautiously now became pillars of support, collaborators in every challenge. We celebrated achievements, comforted one another through failures, and held each other accountable. I learned that resilience thrives in community, that courage multiplies when shared, and that leadership is not about authority, but about fostering trust and inspiring growth. My father continued to guide me, not with intervention, but with wisdom. He taught me that true power is subtle, it is found in influence, integrity, and the ability to lead by example. Through countless conversations, I began to understand the complexity of human behavior: fear, pride, jealousy, and hope all intertwine, and the choices we make can alter not only our lives, but the lives of those around us. Then came the regional competition, a trial unlike any before. It required not just knowledge or skill, but strategy, emotional intelligence, and teamwork. The pressure was immense, and fear whispered in my ear, reminding me of every past failure, every moment of self-doubt. But I had learned to listen, to prepare, and to act with clarity. When our team triumphed, it was not merely a victory over others, it was a victory over my own limitations, my own fears, and the insecurities that had once defined me. Even more unexpectedly, the old bullies approached me afterward. There was no tension, no lingering fear, only mutual recognition. We had all changed. They had learned humility, I had learned assertiveness, and the school environment had shifted toward respect and integrity. I understood then that transformation is rarely a single event, it is a process, a series of decisions, and a willingness to grow. Yet life's lessons did not end there. Challenges arose in ways I had never imagined: family pressures, social expectations, and moments of personal doubt. There were nights when I questioned my path, when fear threatened to overwhelm me. But every time, I remembered the lessons of that first day: courage can be cultivated, support is invaluable, and resilience is born from facing, not avoiding, our fears. By the end of that year, I had become unrecognizable to the girl I had once been. No longer timid, no longer shrinking into the shadows, I had emerged as someone who could face adversity with confidence, guide others with empathy, and navigate life with a sense of purpose and clarity. I understood that life would continue to test me, that shadows would always appear, but I was prepared. I had learned to move through fear with grace, to wield patience and wisdom alongside strength, and to use every challenge as an opportunity to grow. And then came the ultimate realization: life is not about waiting for shadows to disappear. It is about walking through them, step by step, cultivating courage, compassion, and clarity with every stride. Every challenge, every person, every unexpected moment is part of the journey, not a detour from it. The girl who had once trembled under ridicule had grown into a young woman capable of shaping her own destiny, influencing those around her, and facing the unknown with unwavering resolve. As I stood at the threshold of a new chapter, one beyond the familiar halls of school, one filled with unknown challenges and opportunities, I understood the most profound truth of all: true strength is not in never fearing, never failing, or never stumbling. True strength is in continuing forward, learning from every shadow, embracing every lesson, and choosing courage again and again, no matter the cost. Life had taught me that shadows would always exist, but they no longer dictated my steps. I had become the person who could shine despite them, who could inspire others, and who could embrace the uncertainty of the future with confidence, compassion, and wisdom. The journey was far from over, but I was ready, and in that readiness, I discovered a freedom more powerful than fear, more enduring than shadow, and more transformative than anything I had ever imagined. Life has a way of testing us long after we think the worst has passed. Even after victories, recognition, and lessons learned, challenges arise, some subtle, some overwhelming. What I thought would be a simple school story had transformed into a lifelong journey of courage, resilience, and growth. I realized that one moment of fear or humiliation could become a catalyst for decades of learning, shaping the person I would become. In the months that followed, I began to notice subtler forms of conflict and power. Some students were no longer direct bullies but wielded influence in quiet, manipulative ways. They whispered, spread rumors, or attempted to undermine confidence without ever confronting anyone openly. These situations required a new kind of courage, one rooted in patience, observation, and careful action. I learned to respond strategically, using empathy, persuasion, and calm authority. I realized that bravery is not always dramatic; often, it is quiet, consistent, and intelligent. Friendships became more meaningful than ever. The students who had once been silent or timid found voices through my encouragement. Together, we built networks of support that extended beyond school walls, sharing knowledge, helping one another navigate difficult situations, and learning to trust. I understood that resilience is not a solitary trait; it flourishes within communities that cultivate mutual respect, honesty, and accountability. My father remained my mentor, guiding me not with interventions, but with conversations, reflections, and wisdom. I learned that real strength does not come from authority alone, but from example, influence, and integrity. His lessons became my compass as I navigated complex social situations, academic pressures, and the inevitable uncertainties of growing up. Then came challenges far beyond anything I had imagined: leadership opportunities, competitions requiring emotional intelligence, and moments that tested both my ethical convictions and personal patience. Each challenge reminded me that growth is ongoing, and courage is measured not in single acts, but in a lifetime of decisions. One particularly defining moment came during a regional academic conference, where I was tasked with presenting our school's project before experienced judges. The pressure was immense, and doubts crept into my mind, whispering reminders of past failures. But I had learned to trust my preparation, my insight, and my ability to lead with confidence. The presentation was flawless, not because there was no fear, but because I had learned to channel it. Every hesitation, every moment of doubt became fuel for clarity and precision. By the end, our team received accolades, not only for content but for collaboration, integrity, and composure under pressure. In that moment, I understood that success is not about perfection, it is about resilience, adaptability, and courage under scrutiny. Even the old bullies, now older and more self-aware, approached me. There was no tension, only acknowledgement that time and growth change everything. They had learned humility, I had learned assertiveness, and the environment around us had shifted toward respect and understanding. I realized that transformation is rarely instantaneous, it is a gradual accumulation of choices, lessons, and self-awareness. Beyond school, life continued to challenge me in unexpected ways. Family responsibilities, social expectations, and personal insecurities tested my resilience daily. But I had learned to navigate complexity with patience, wisdom, and self-respect. I developed an understanding of human nature that was both compassionate and discerning, recognizing when to trust, when to stand firm, and when to act strategically. By the end of that year, I had become someone unrecognizable to the girl I once was. The timid, silent observer had transformed into a confident, empathetic leader capable of influencing others positively, navigating adversity, and embracing life with purpose and clarity. The girl who had once feared ridicule now walked with unwavering resolve, understanding that courage is not a single moment, but a lifetime of choices, actions, and growth. And the ultimate revelation: life is never about avoiding shadows. It is about stepping through them, learning from them, and allowing each challenge to shape you into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Shadows will always exist, they are the measure of growth, the test of courage, and the canvas on which resilience is painted. Standing at the threshold of new horizons, college, career opportunities, and the vast unknown, I understood that my journey was far from over. But I also knew that I had the inner strength, the wisdom, and the empathy to face every obstacle. Life would continue to challenge me, but I was ready, and in that readiness, I discovered a freedom more powerful than fear, more enduring than shadow, and more transformative than any challenge I had ever faced. Because true courage, I realized, is not the absence of fear, it is the mastery of it, the ability to move forward despite uncertainty, and the willingness to grow continuously, embracing every challenge as an opportunity to become a better version of yourself.